Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Global Entrepreneurship Week Sacramento 2020. We're excited to bring to you a workshop with David Bland focused on testing business ideas. My name is Cameron Law, and I'm the Interim Executive Director of the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I also serve as the Sacramento organizer for Global Entrepreneurship Week. So I'm joined here today by two of our entrepreneurs in residence, Jesse Becker-Alexander and Brian Gladden. I think they're doing their virtual wave. We typically would point them out in the crowd, but since we're all joined virtually, they're doing the virtual hand waves. So for those of you that don't know, the Carlson Center serves as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to explore and launch their businesses. Our mission is to make innovation and entrepreneurship pervasive throughout the greater Sacramento region. We have this clear mission to make innovation and entrepreneurship this hub of the greater Sacramento region. So you know what? You don't really have to be a student or an alumni of Sacramento State to engage in our programs and resources. In line with our university's Anchor initiative, we want to anchor our support in the community and help mobilize new business creations and support in scaling current startup operations. We offer a variety of programs and resources that serve entrepreneurs at different stages along the entrepreneurial journey. And today, with Global Entrepreneurship Week, falls under what's called our Discover program. These programs aim to really provide an on-ramp and an inspiration for you to take your ideas to the next level and really find that the Carlson Center is a partner for you in that business ideation and that business creation process. For those of you that don't know, Global Entrepreneurship Week is indeed global. So today we join over 180 countries in a week-long celebration of innovation and entrepreneurship. It's full of events, activities, competitions, workshops like today, and networking focused on really building our startup communities and our entrepreneurial ecosystems. There's nothing better than a variety of actors, everyone from entrepreneurial ecosystem champions, entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, students, faculty, all getting together in one space to really celebrate entrepreneurship and the role that it plays in our ecosystem. Again, we are super thrilled to have this insightful workshop on testing business ideas with David Bland. He'll be tackling really how to apply the different lenses of design thinking into how to look at rapid experimentation and testing business ideas. So I will now introduce Brian Gladden, who's one of our entrepreneurs in residence, who will share a bit about David Bland and how we've used some of his tools in supporting entrepreneurs through our virtual entrepreneurship toolkit series. So take it away, Brian.
Thank you, Cameron. And I think you did a great job of introducing David pretty well. So I'm going to add just a little bit of color to that. I'm very excited that we have David, who is the CEO and founder of Precoil. And David helps people test business ideas. He's the co-author of Testing Business Ideas with Alex Osterwalder and Strategizer, which is the book you see on the screen and here. I highly recommend you buy it. So David doesn't have to plug it. I'll plug it for him. I think it's the Bible for business testing ideas. David pioneered GE Fastworks with Eric Ries. And for those of you who don't know, Eric Ries is the one who created Lean Startup. So you're getting a lot of this from lots of work with the thought leaders and lots of years of experience. After that, he worked with teams at Adobe and even helped Toyota apply lean startup practices. And before his transition into consulting, David spent over 10 years of his career at technology startups. And he stays connected to that startup scene through his work at several Silicon Valley accelerators. And now, hopefully, this is just our first step in a journey with working with David in the Carlson Center now that he lives in the Sacramento region. So without further ado, I'm really excited to present David Bland and Testing Business Ideas to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I'm recently kind of in the area up here. So, it's hard to get integrated in the middle of a pandemic. So hopefully I'll get to meet all of you maybe in the area for real coffee in person someday. Basically, you're going to get kind of behind the scenes of what I do, which is pretty amazing. I get to just help companies test business ideas. I have to say my journey was really kind of winding, as you would hear for many probably entrepreneurs. I went to school for design, and then I joined a startup at the first .com bubble after I graduated. And it was crazy. We kept, it was a financial services startup, and I kept building stuff for them nights and weekends for consumers. We thought we were B2C. And right before we ran out of money, we were like, maybe we're really a B2B startup. And that's when we took off, and we were acquired for 16 million in 2006. But that was really influential in my career, I think, early on, because it doesn't matter how amazing or how like polished something is. If your customers don't want it, they don't want it. And so really, today, I'm just going to be basically kind of taking you through my journey, also some thinking behind the book, and how I help companies and help entrepreneurs. And and then we'll do some little lightweight exercises for you all and do some Q&A as well. So if you all want to, I can drop the link to the board here for everyone. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Threw it in there, yeah.
You don't need to register. You can just join as a visitor and you'll be anonymous squirrel or whale or something at the bottom, which is fine. So basically, what I want to do is help you kind of think about de-risking your business ideas. And so giving you just some overall, perspective and how I approach it. And I do have a code of conduct. It's basically like Bill and Ted code of conduct, which is be excellent to each other. So, when we do share out, just like use a constructive tone and everything and be respectful. For those of you who haven't used Mural before, I do have like a little logistics tab here. It's kind of just like a virtual whiteboard. So double clicking makes it sticky. You can drag and drop stuff. You can kind of like copy and paste stuff in. So I use it a lot, especially since March. I've been using it before then, but especially since travel's been locked down for me, all my advising is usually using something like this. I tend to like these things just because it keeps how my co-author says, like blah blah blah, keeps us from doing that where we just talk past each other and don't capture any of the learnings. I do have a kind of a Google it box here where I tend to ramble sometimes, and if I start quoting all these different books in addition to what we've already talked about, I can drop the links here, so at least you have an idea of what I'm rambling on about. So if I bring up something, and then here. If you have any questions, obviously you can just drop them in chat. But if you also would rather just drop them in here, basically you just double click and you can type in questions that we'll get to at the end. So if it's something like, how does this work for B2B, which is usually what I hear, you can just put that there. And then when we come back up, we'll go, okay, what kind of questions do we have? So that's just one way to make it easier to kind of grab some of the thoughts. I'm trying not to interrupt as we go through this session, but at the end we'll chat about what kind of questions you have. Okay, so with that aside, what I want to do is kind of get into sort of the basics of the talk and of the workshop. And so my co-author, let me hide my outline here. So my co-author basically created this thing you probably have heard of called a business model canvas. His first book, I believe, was about 10 years ago now. I think it was 10 years ago this year, which was Business Model Generation. And it was kind of like the canvas to start the whole Canvas craze. There's so many canvases. Obviously, you're going to hear from Ash Maurya later this week, who I also know and admire. He has a version of this called the Lean Canvas. I tend to run with, this one, mostly just because of the nature of the work I do. But basically, whoops, sorry. Someone's dropping stickies right on here. Okay. If you can write stickies like right where I'm at, that'd be great. So basically, I want to show how we've been kind of evolving this and moving it forward and trying to like push the ideas forward, because we've learned a lot in 10 years. We've learned a lot with regards to how to structure and frame your business and how to move forward. So basically what we've been doing is, when I work with a lot of pre-product market fit things, I love this framing from design thinking, which is, is it desirable? So a lot of this like desirability risk around your value prop and your customer segments and your relationships and your channels. Like, what is the risk around really early stage? Like, do people understand my value proposition? Do I have the right customers? Do they have jobs, pains and gains that I'm targeting? Viability, which is more around, should you be working on this? Is this a startup or is this a hobby? If you have no business model, you probably have a hobby. So to make it sustainable, even when I'm working with nonprofits, is how do we actually, capture revenue, keep this thing going, get funding. A lot of that risk around your revenue and your cost is around viability. And then, can you do it, which is more around feasibility. And so the can you is more the backstage of the kind of business, which is, can you, do the right activities? So more verbs. Can you acquire the right resources? So either physical or digital. So those are more nouns. And then can you find the right partners? Because so often, especially for entrepreneurs, you can't do it all. So you have to find partners that help, help you execute. And so usually the flow when I'm working with, early stage entrepreneurs is, okay, so what's your value prop and who's your customer? And sometimes I do these interchangeably, but it's around, what are you doing? Like, what's the outcome, not just your product, but what's the outcome or perceived benefit of your product? Okay. And then who are you focused on? And then it quickly moves to, okay, so what are your channels? So not just acquisition, but also distribution. How are you reaching your customers? How are you delivering your value to customers? And then what's the nature of the relationship with your customers? So is it transactional? Is it more sort of a subscription, which is recurring over time? Like, what is the nature of your relationship with them? And then how do you make money, which is also pretty important. So if you'll notice, a lot of that early stage kind of mapping things out, a lot of your risk could be, depending on how far you are along in your journey, around, desirability. So around your value proposition, your segments, how do you get to them? Then it starts to kind of bleed into viability a little bit. How are you generating money or generating revenue? And then backstage, what are the activities and the resources that you need to acquire or need to have, need to perform? And then what are your costs? And then finally, who are you partnering with? And so you'll notice, like, it's not a left to right. I almost never start left to right, because even if you were, let's say, pitching an investor or pitching a co-founder, you're probably not going to lead with who you're partnering with. You're probably going to say, here's my value proposition, and then here are the customers I'm focused on, and here's how we reach them. This is what the relationship looks like. Here's how we make money. And then backstage, here are the things we're doing. Here are the things we need. Here's what it costs, and we're partnering with somebody. So it's really interesting. I got to spend a week with Alex in Switzerland before we wrote the book. It was like 2016 or so. And I asked him, I was like, I've been using this tool for a while, and people kind of treat it as a checklist. And what I didn't realize until I heard like the backstory from him about how he created it was more like a system, So like, this is how you deliver your value to your customers, right? This is about the bi-directional relationship with your customers. This is how, you generate revenue, right? And then backstage, you pull your activities and resources and you say, okay, what are the costs incurred from that? And then if you partner with somebody, they're bringing an activity or a resource that helps you create your value proposition. So I thought it was really interesting to kind of get a backstory of, what is this from a overall like relationship perspective? Because, if you happen to change, let's say, your customer segment, then there's a good chance it's going to impact maybe your channels, especially for our startup. I mean, we went from B2C to B2B. We had to have B2B salespeople. I mean, it wasn't a consumer facing thing anymore. And so we're selling into all these investment banks, and we needed, connections, and we needed a sales team. And it just had ripple effects through our whole startup. Interesting enough, the two startups I worked at after that, who just kind of persevered no matter what, didn't do so well. It was like, oh, we don't need to change anything. Those aren't our customers. And we just kept going. And, you look brilliant when you get that right. The problem is there's so many that get it wrong, And so this idea of having a vision, but being open to the idea that you might be wrong is pretty valuable. And so basically, kind of with that framing, what I end up doing with teams and what we're going to do a little bit today is there's kind of a flow. So basically what I do is I say, okay, let's sketch out a canvas and have, even if they're just guesses, have an idea of what your model is. And I think we've kind of maybe developed some bad habits, even in the Valley over the years, which is sort of like, well, just figure out the business model later. You'll be fine. And I think that's kind of coming back to roost in a way. not to bash like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all the gig economy companies, and Twitter, it becomes like Twitter. I love Twitter. I cheer for them, but I often wonder about their business model too. But we kind of started these all with like, let's just keep going, raise a bunch of VC money, and we'll figure it out. And what can happen is something like even what happened with the legislation here that they kind of sidestepped it in a way, but just imagine if Uber and Lyft and DoorDash had to treat their actual contract workers as employees. Think of that cost structure box, what would happen there? And they're already having a hard time, sustaining. So, I think, what I tend to recommend and what I'm usually doing in batches of entrepreneurs is, look, at least take your best guess of how this business model could work and we'll figure it out. But I don't want to just defer the conversation and then later, after you have a bunch of recurring customers, try to figure out what your business model is going to be. So I tend to err on at least sketch it out early. So basically, if you kind of look at, the canvas here on the left, what I tend to do is say, okay, let's just start writing these down. So, what are the big assumptions that you're making around, who your customer is and your value proposition and, your revenue and, basically just writing them down and getting them out of your head, because there's a good chance some of these are probably already keeping you up at night if you're an entrepreneur. And so I like writing these in kind of this format where we say, we believe that. And I like prefacing kind of the statements that way, because then we say, all right, if we're saying these are beliefs, then we might be open to the idea that we're going to test them. If you write them down in ways where it feels like this reality distortion field where you're just convincing everybody that this is true, I mean, it looks great again if you get it right. But I like this style of, okay, we have a vision. We know there's some risks here. We're going to actually write these down as, hey, if these aren't true, we could be in big trouble. And so what I do is we basically kind of pull these over. And then I have a little 2x2 I helped create from my colleagues back at my last company who wrote Lean UX, Jeff Gothelf and Josh Seiden. I basically kind of riffed on what they had and added in design thinking. And we had this little kind of 2x2 called assumptions mapping. And everybody has a 2x2, or at least every consultant I've ever met has a 2x2. This one is used by Google. It's part of their design sprint program. It's been picked up by governments and all kinds of places. But basically all it is you kind of pulling these over as a team. So if it's you by yourself, you can do it that way. I would recommend, if you have co-founders, keeping them also involved in this exercise. But basically, because you have these kind of like colors, you can start to see, desirability, viability, feasibility. You can start to see like what kinds of risk you have. And so the way I do it is basically, okay, here's a belief we've written down. Here's an assumption. How important is it for us to succeed? And then how much evidence or not do we have to support it? And it was really interesting when I first created this. I was using known and unknown. So if you like look at this online, if you like just Google assumptions mapping, you might see some of the older versions out there. And I'd always got these like really spirited entrepreneurs who kind of like believe their own hype to an extent. It's endearing and I get it. But I would like, why did you put this here? And they would say, well, I just know. I was like, that's not exactly like the kind of answer I want. And then I would say, okay, let's do certain and uncertain. And so they put a sticky there and I would say, okay, why'd you put that there? And they're like, well, I'm certain. I was like, well, how are you certain? And they would say, well, I just know. I was like, okay, this isn't working. So I was working with my co-author, Alex, and we finally got to this point where we said, let's just do have evidence and no evidence. And so what happened was we said, it's all about whether they have evidence or not. So let's just cut to the chase and get to that. So now when I'm working with entrepreneurs and they put this down, it's like, okay, why'd you put that there? Well, I just know. I was like, okay, but did you have any evidence to support that? Because this is all about evidence. Well, no, I don't have any evidence. So finally we get into this conversation of like, okay, do you really have any observable evidence, like qualitative or quantitative, to support that statement that you just wrote down? So basically what we look at is kind of the top right. So we say, okay, based on, our strategy, we lay down our risk, we wrote down our risks. what like is the most important stuff that we have no evidence to support. And if it's wrong, we fail in a big way, not in a small way. We fail maybe in a slow way and not in a fast way. And so from there, basically it's all about, okay, how do you match that kind of risk to your experiments? So but what we did in the book is we cataloged 44 experiments. And there's plenty more than 44, but I had to stop writing at some point because there's over 200 pages of them in the book. So it's very much like a reference guide. It's not like some narrative kind of storybook. It's very much like an encyclopedia in a way. Because I kept running into founders who said, okay, I ran interviews, I did a couple surveys, and then I built the entire app. And I was like, wow, you went from some pretty like low cost, low strength of evidence things that maybe hinted that you were on the right track. And then you spent like $600K on an app. And if you're wrong, I know this might be like a secret, but you can't pivot if you're broke. So there is no pivoting. If you built the app and it's the wrong app for the wrong customer, it takes money to reposition that thing, to strip away or add features, to do like, if you've spent all your money on something, there is no pivoting. Like I just hope that you had actually done more than interviews and surveys before you spend all your money. So, the good news is there's all kinds of other stuff that you can do to kind of pay down your risk. And so basically it's pretty ambitious and it still has some problems, I admit. But what we did is we said, look, throughout the hundreds of teams I've worked with, what have I seen, and what would I say if I was, because I wrote this book like I was like coaching somebody, what would I say if you were kind of at this point, what would it look like? And so basically what we did is we said, okay, how much do these experiments cost to run? Now it's kind of subjective because, if I'm working in pharma, an experiment costs different. If I'm working in deep sea exploration, an experiment is different than I'm working on an app for sharing pictures of your cats, right? So all of those have somewhat different costs, but in general, how much does it cost to kind of run these? The other thing we did is we kind of broke out time into setup time and runtime. So it's basically saying, all right, how long does this take to set up? And then how long should I run it for? And so sometimes that matters because it might only take a few hours to set something up, but you might need to run it for a couple of weeks, or it might take several days to set something up, but you only run it for a few hours. So that we kind of broke it out that way. And then we also added in evidence strength, which is like, is this what they say versus what they do? What they say is pretty weak strength of evidence because we all know we've talked to people and probably asked them leading closed-ended biased questions about hypothetical future scenarios and had them go, yeah, I would totally use that. And then realize that they would never use it. So versus what they do, which is, they actually gave you payment information for a thing that you're about to deliver. Okay. And then we added in the themes. So desirability, feasibility, and viability. So with that said, basically what you have, and I included these in the board for you all too, is we kind of separated them out between discovery and validation. So kind of pulling from Steve Blank and his work with 4 Steps to Epiphany and Startup Owner's Manual. The backstory there is that Eric Ries was in Steve's class. And so that became kind of the genesis of the Lean Startup book. Steve also has some amazing material as well. And the way he frames it is customer discovery and customer validation. And when we were trying to do this really ambitious effort, we said, we want to go beyond customer. We want to go into overall discovery, overall validation. And so if you notice, a lot of these sort of discovery, experiments, these are a lot of open-ended directional kind of experiments. So if you're joining this today and you just thought up your idea maybe this morning, chances are you're going to start over here, which is, hey, do I even know that there's something there at all before I build? Because there's so much that you can learn before building, especially now. And so a lot of these are kind of framed that way with I'm really early in my journey. I don't know if there's anything here, even like a a job to be done from a customer. And then on the other side, what we have are validation experiments. And so here, it's sort of more around, I tried to write a book without using the phrase MVP, minimum viable product. I was almost successful. I wasn't. But what I thought was more helpful was like the types of MVPs I would see from teams that I work with. And so basically those types are, Concierge, which is manually doing it all and not building anything. Wizard of Oz, which is you're doing it manually, but it isn't obvious to the customer that you're doing it manually. So there's like a curtain of sorts. A single feature, which is more like, I think early days Foursquare or Hotel Tonight, where it just did one thing and that was it. It just did one thing really well. And then mashup, which is more like the no-code movement. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like wiring up Airtable and Unbounce and some kind of Zapier script or something, and it all works and delivers value without you building much at all, like without you coding. And so what I found helpful was that when I'm working with teams that are a little further along or entrepreneurs that are a little further along, you can wire stuff together in a way that delivers value. And it doesn't maybe even scale, but it's enough that you can get traction and figure out, okay, am I really onto anything here? Can people pay me for delivering something to them, even if I didn't build an infinitely scalable thing? So maybe to dive in a couple and then we'll do our exercise. One of the ways I help teams is just with early customer acquisition. And so we kind of treat our ads like experiments. And so basically, kind of taking this model from Steve Blank, which is, it's kind of like, I love this pyramid. It's like, do customers even have the problem? So do they even have the problem you're trying to solve? Is there any observable evidence? Are they aware of the problem? So you all probably have a friend that has a problem but isn't aware of it. It's a different kind of conversation. It doesn't mean you give up on your friend, but it does happen. And then are they seeking a solution to the problem? And so what I found with a lot of startups is like, there's kind of a break between here. And so I was working with a company on mouth pain, like solving for mouth pain. And what we did is we were like, okay, well, people obviously have mouth pain. They know if they have it, they're aware because they're experiencing physical pain. But I think our acquisition strategy was a little off because we went with Facebook ads and Twitter ads, okay? And we drove people to a page with a sign up for our solution, all right? Nobody cared. Like we had a 1%, and I'm being very generous here, a 1% conversion on that page. With a value prop in an ad, they click over, there's value prop above the fold. Hey, this is what we do. Here's your call to action. So before giving up, we thought, okay, if I had mouth pain, where would I go to seek a solution to that? Now, you should probably go to your dentist. So number one, you should probably, go to your dentist. And some people did. Far too many people, though, went to Google. And so what we found was if we did the same ad, but instead of pushing it to them, we did more of a pull. So we did Google search only ads. Okay. Same page, same value proposition. We had a 40% conversion. That's insane. Like usually if you get 15%, you're doing really well. But you think like 4 out of every 10 people that visited the page signed up. Now it is a smaller number of people because we did search trend analysis and we saw, wow, like there are people searching for this topic. If we serve up our ad when they're searching, there's a good chance if our value proposition is strong, they're going to come over. And so this kind of stuff, I feel like it might seem trivial to all of you, but we need to start treating our ads and our early stage acquisition as experiments. Like we believe that, and then let's structure our ad to have specific metrics that we're going to measure, and we have to hit thresholds. And what was interesting with this team is they didn't give up on the first failure. And so that's the other thing that hopefully you'll come away with today is that it often takes you running multiple experiments to know if you're on the right track. I usually tell teams to go for about 12 weeks before they give up. And that might seem like a long time to you, but I don't want teams getting too excited or too depressed after the first experiment. because chances are you're going to have to try multiple things and then look at your overall, strength of evidence over a series of experiments. The other one I'll just touch base on that's kind of fun is the Concierge. And so that's another one that I really like running. I like it mostly because the evidence strength is really high, because you are basically like manually delivering and creating the product, and then basically like hand-holding people through a process. So if you think of, before creating a new travel app, you could literally just walk people through the booking process and start to learn from them. And then what you learn from there, you can actually go back and use it to inform your product design and your business design. I also like Wizard of Oz, which is more like you would take the person out and it would just look like a service. Maybe the more fun ones. So my last company, our team in New York did SMS Based Dating App for men. So basically it was like magic or something where you would text a number to a bot that would respond to you with dating advice over SMS. So a lot of like men would text it something like, oh, this is what she likes, and I'm not sure where to take her to dinner in New York City. What are your suggestions? And then the bot would kind of like respond back with all the specific tone and what the advice would be. What they didn't know is it was just like a group of women texting him back that we had hired off of Craigslist, and they all used the same tone and they all used the same kind of, I think they were using like Scarlett Johansson or somebody as their like tone that they were using overall. And they basically kept giving advice. The problem with that experiment though was somebody posted it to Hacker News, and then we had 1,000 people sign up in the first few hours, and our team of women could not handle 1,000 different requests from clueless guys on where to bring their first date. And so then they got depressed because the bot was ignoring them. So just keep in mind that, like in hindsight, what we should have done there is probably have a waiting list or something, rather than having 1,000 people sign up. But the good thing is, like, we learned so much about what kind of advice men would want, and also whether they'd be willing to type it over SMS. Surprisingly, a lot of them were just willing to type it. So a lot of these things, it's just being really scrappy. It doesn't have to scale, but you're trying to learn, okay, what kind of desirability risk do I have here? What kind of feasibility risk do I have? What kind of viability risk? That experiment in particular had some feasibility and viability risks, because we couldn't just keep hiring women to answer texts. And so it needed to be a bot eventually, or something automated. And it was very weak on the regards of, would they pay for this? Like they would send an SMS for free advice, but would they pay for a service like this was another thing that we had a hard time with. Okay, so but enough of me talking. What I wanted us to do, so basically what I have, if you haven't clicked the link in chat, please do. And we're down here in experiment sequences. So down at the bottom, if you get lost, there is an outline here. So you can just like click the number. It'll also drop you in there. If you get totally lost, the board's not too big though. What I've done for you all is I have taken the experiments from the book and added them as little cards. And so this is kind of a glimpse into how we structured the book. I don't expect you to like read through each one at this point, but they're here for your reference. So let's say, for example, you say, hey, I don't know what would be a good one. I don't know what a feature stub is. So basically what you could do is you could double click on this and you go, okay, feature stub, what does that look like? And it would just open the PDF, or you could just zoom in. A feature stub is something that if you had an existing product, you would put something in that like mimics what a new feature could do. But when people click on it, it's more of a, hey, we're not ready yet. Give them a survey or something. Google does this all the time to us at this point. So many times I'm in Gmail or something and I click and it's we're not ready yet kind of thing. It just gives you a little bit of evidence if you're on the right track at all, if anyone cares. But that's just one. There's a bunch in here, but I've organized them in discovery on the left and validation on the right. So it doesn't mean you always have to go left to right, but 9 times out of 10 when I'm working with teams, that's usually the way it goes. If it's something early stage, we try to defer building, even if it's any kind of MVP, before we know we're on the right track. But what I want you all to think about, and we'll do this as an exercise, is think about like something you're working on. And I want you to think about what kinds of experiments do you think you could run almost like in a sequence? So for example, and I'll just sketch one out here for you so you have an idea. So if I said, hey, I want to build an SMS based dating chatbot. All right. So, kind of what I was talking about, what we did, first off, we did customer interviews. All right. So we interviewed some men to see if like this was even a problem. Did they have dating advice or not? Were they having trouble finding advice? We did some paper prototypes on basically how it could work before we went off and designed it, of how like the flow could work. We did a landing page, right? We didn't run any ads to it. It was mostly just like driving people there through social media, and then the link getting out on Hacker News, which was unfortunate. And then we did Wizard of Oz, which is basically kind of like when they clicked, they would give their advice or they would give their kind of question, and then we would respond with the advice through the number and the text that they used on the landing page. And so if you look at that, and that's just a short experiment sequence. They don't have to be very long, but we kind of went from interviews to a paper prototype to a landing page, and then we manually delivered kind of like the value, but it wasn't obvious that it wasn't a bot. So I mean, this can just give you an idea, but what I wanted you all to do, and I'm going to give you about 5 minutes for this. I'm going to set a timer, which is I would love you down here to kind of, if it's something you're working on, great. If you don't want to share that and you want to do something just fun, that's fine too. But I want to give you 5 minutes to kind of create what you think your sequence would be, and then we'll share them out and we can have some Q&A as well. All right. So down here below this, where I'm at right now. So you can just double click and start creating stickies. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then if some of you want to share out, great. And then we can also have some Q&A. All right. So 5 minutes, and I don't know if you want to play music or not. That's cool too. No pressure, Cameron. But I'm going to go on mute, and 5 minutes, and
perfect. Go. I will share that same screen, and then I can have that same music going. So.
All right. So I'm not sure how you want to do this, Cameron or Brian. Basically, have some people unmute who are willing to share. I see some of you ran through this, so thank you. Does anybody want to share something that they're working on? I can just screen share on my side, so you don't have to worry about it on your side.
Sure. I guess we can just take any volunteers that first want to unmute yourself and walk us through.
Okay, I can go.
Okay. Which one is yours?
So mine is the one right below yours. I can figure out how to type the text to put a little header, but
okay,
right
this one?
Yes. So I'm working on an electric composter, and so I'm at this. I've done the product survey with a few potential customers, and then I've gone through. I created a 3D illustration design concept, and I'm at this phase where I need to create a CAD model to then be able to build the prototype, and then I'm assuming after a testing phase I need to fix any bugs or design flaws, and then I was thinking right after that we do an initial launch.
Okay, thanks for sharing. I think when I'm working with hardware or hardware and software combined, it is a little more expensive sometimes, mostly because it's just so cheap to experiment in software anymore. But hardware still, I mean, you can 3D print and do some things, but it can still, it's Mark Andreessen. I went to a conference where Mark Andreessen spoke from Andreessen Horowitz, and he said the difference between software and hardware is that hardware is hard. I was like, it was so like silly, but it's so true. I would say a couple things. One, anything you can do to get an explainer video out there sooner,
Okay.
even if it's just on something that doesn't show the fully working thing, but as close as you can. So maybe even around the prototyping phase, if you can get an explainer video out, I think that could be super helpful. And then when you're testing, making sure you're testing with customers if possible. I had this founder who was part of the team behind Citizen M in the book, which is, I don't know if you've ever stayed in one of those. They're in New York and in London, but they're basically like, it's a hotel and it's built almost like in shipping containers. So each room is like its own module thing. And it's not for staying in very long. It's only for a few days for business travelers. And he moved on to test this micro living modular kind of like long-term stay hotel. And what he ended up doing is he just prototyped one room. And he kept taking people through testing it. And he said he even tested it with cleaning people, because he was afraid that people would like it, but then it'd be really hard to clean because it was modular and like the stairs pushed back under the bed and stuff like that. And so I was really impressed with the way he was thinking, because I mean, how do you test a hotel? It's like, it sounds pretty hard. It's like testing a car, and so I thought it was really interesting for him to go just like, here's one prototype, but he's going to test it over and over and over with customers, and then different types of customers. So, but yeah, it's possible. It's just, I would just be mindful of, I would, again, get the explainer video out there sooner rather than later. And then making sure in your testing phase, you're thinking of like different kinds of customers to get a better sample set.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sounds like an awesome idea though. Maybe we can do one more and then do some Q&A. So anyone else want to share?
Sorry. Hi, my name is Abu Bakr. I came in a little bit late, but I don't know if you went over this, but how would you be able to get, I guess, it's like a prototype, but it's more of like a mock-up of an app?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So with what I typically end up doing is I use things that do clickable prototypes. So there's an app called Pop App. It's POP. I believe Marvel purchased them. I can't remember exactly. But you could literally even draw out what your app would be and take pictures of it and have people click through it. You could even go that low fidelity, or you could do higher fidelity that looks like a real app. But a lot of the testing I've done on apps, we've prototyped out an app, and then we took it out in the field with people and had customers kind of click through things. When it was more complicated, I'd invite customers in, but you just have to be careful with that, because you do kind of bias them if you invite them into your office, especially now. It's harder anyway.
Yeah.
But some of the connected car stuff I've worked on, we were testing out, could people pair their phone with a car? And we would try out different apps and different prototypes to see what the flow was like. But yeah, luckily, there are a lot of things out there that create clickable prototypes now that are low cost. So those are out there. I would just recommend checking out Pop App. That was ones we use most of the time.
How would you be able to, I guess, test it during this climate, or what's happening around now?
Yeah, this climate makes it a little challenging. What I've been doing is using products like user testing or user Zoom, where I can filter to a specific kind of customer and then have them walk through something virtually, and it gives you a recording. You have to be careful because it can get expensive, but the other low-cost way would be, look on Craigslist and other places and source people through that, or through Mechanical Turk or something from Amazon. But I've had some pretty good luck using user testing and user Zoom. All right, so we're kind of in the Q&A phase at this point. What other questions do you all have? Cameron, I can just kind of walk through these first if you like.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to start. And then if there's any questions at the end, we can have them in the chat.
Okay. So if you run an experiment and get a negative result, how do you know if it's a false negative or a true negative? Yeah. There's like you're pregnant, but it's a male, right? There's like some like type 1, type 2 errors kind of thing going on here. It's hard. This is also why I recommend not just running one experiment. So for example, if you run experiment a week for 12 weeks, then if you do end up getting like a false negative, there's a good chance it's not going to play out across, like you're not going to have multiple false negatives across multiple experiments usually. The other thing I recommend for this is if you're not a designer and you're trying to put something out there to get feedback on, but it just looks like some kind of website built in the 1990s, you're going to get a lot of false negatives. And so I've had that happen in the past where there's this misconception, I think, with lean startup for a while, which was, hey, just make it like as terrible looking as possible and get it out as fast as possible. And I mean, that's one way to look at it. But if you do that and you get false negatives because people think it's either not legit or it's so terrible looking that they don't believe you, it can also turn you off on something that might be a good idea. So it's a balance you kind of have to walk. And depending on the industry you're in, the level of polish matters. So if I'm in fashion, like I've tested products that are sold in Victoria's Secret, we had to have a pretty high level of polish on all our material, like on our explainer video and on the landing page and on our ads and on the actual garment we were testing itself. If I had hacked together something that looked really terrible, I imagine we would have gotten very different results versus like, I don't want to stereotype, but I don't know. Think of an industry where this user experience isn't quite there. I don't want to say like CRM or something, but if you jump in another industry where people are like, oh yeah, everything looks like crap here, then yeah, it's okay if yours looks like crap too. But when you go into something really polished, you have to be really careful there. Is there a PDF version of this? I can export this to PDF for you all, but I think there's a bug in Mural that it won't actually bring all the PDFs down below with it, but I can give that to Cameron and Brian after today. I can export this and give you all a PDF version of this. For the book itself, it is in PDF format, but you have to purchase it through Amazon. It's one of those things you have to like view through the Kindle app. How do you find problems in an industry you don't have experience or connections in? Yeah, that's tough. I think you could start by doing search trend analysis and things that are at your disposal. So LinkedIn is great for this too, where you can just start, like basically data mining LinkedIn for types of people in certain types of companies and certain regions. And you can also join LinkedIn groups to see what they're talking about, what they're complaining about. You could also do keyword trend analysis, kind of like we did with the mouth pain thing, where you jump onto Google and you start looking for search volumes around specific problems. But it's tough. I will have to say it's really tough. And then also just be mindful of, be careful jumping into an industry where you don't have any experience. It doesn't mean you can't. Like, I don't know, Mark Cuban leveled himself up on how cable works, and it worked out really well for him, how broadband can work. He kind of taught himself broadband, but you have to have really usually deep expertise in whatever, industry you're jumping into at some point. So I would start online doing search trend analysis and then try to teach yourself whatever that industry is as fast as possible because it's really tough if you don't have any experience. What else we got here? How much money should we budget for this testing phase? Yeah, so it does depend on the kind of test you're running and in what market you're in. So for example, I usually advise against doing a Kickstarter right away or an Indiegogo campaign because you might drop $30,000 to $50,000 on it. But by the time you have a really professional video and you're doing paid acquisition and you're designing all the perks, it can add up really quickly. But if you're just doing early stage, anything B2C software, you should be able to do stuff within, a few $1,000s. Kind of like what I mentioned earlier, you can prototype out clickable stuff almost for free. So it just tends to get more expensive based on like industry usually. So if you're a B2B startup and you're trying to get like radiologists, well, we're in time of COVID, and how are you going to get to a radiologist if you don't know any is going to be really hard. and you're going to probably have to spend money to get to them somehow. And so it just gets more expensive depending on industry. But I would advise against spending a ton of money on like paid acquisition early on, because you don't want your business addicted to that. And then you have to scale, and then you have to spend more money to get more customers. So yeah, it's a hard question to answer, but hopefully that helped. How much time? We have a few more minutes. So what are all the ways to test sales landing page, where to get testers? Yeah, so I mean, there are different ways. You could use some of the services I mentioned, like user testing or user Zoom. You could also just go use social media. Quite often, if you just go to a Google group or a LinkedIn group, and as long as you don't violate every rule the policy, like the moderators have, you could usually like post surveys and things there, or try to get people to come to your page through Twitter, through Instagram. Yeah, the good news is social media. If your customers are anywhere on the internet now, which we're all suddenly remote, so most people are on the internet now, it's actually kind of not as hard now to get to customers. That VP at a billion-dollar corporation is at home like all of us and on Zoom all day and on LinkedIn. So through personal email, there's all kinds of ways you can get to these people now. So, but I would say brainstorm where you think your customers are, and then start testing different channels. It's a lot of just trial and error. What else? Is it okay to build something that already exists? Yeah, there's no problem in that. I think sometimes we overthink this, and we think, oh no, this isn't unique enough and we shouldn't do it. And quite often you could still have a pretty decent lifestyle business just doing something either a little better or a little differently or for a different segment. So I do think we fall into this trap sometimes where we're like, oh, I don't have a unique startup idea, so I shouldn't pursue it. There's usually space, with some exceptions, but I would say, yeah, I mean, I would be mindful of, you're probably going to end up competing. I mentioned Hotel Tonight earlier. If somebody came to me and said, I'm going to launch an app in the travel space, I would have just been like, why? Because there's so many, you're competing with so many. And they were like, oh no, we're just going to offer hotels for people that need one tonight. And it's a small segment, right? Like I landed somewhere at an airport and forgot to book my hotel. It comes in pretty handy. And they were able to build a really awesome business off of it. So, there are all kinds of different ways you can segment and resegment things. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to all these.
No, yeah, no, I was about to just say, no, I think we can call it to a close. I appreciate all the questions and the engagement and the different mural board. I think that was great. And David, just thank you for your time and sharing your experience and expertise with us, and really helping to mobilize and help some of our entrepreneurs learn how to go about testing those business ideas. Before we log off, I do want to make sure everyone knows we do have a number of programs the rest of the week. So we're just getting started with Global Entrepreneurship Week, and I'm throwing in the chat a link to our website that has a number of the programs that are taking place the rest of the week. We have one more event this evening, which is at 5 p.m., which is the Entrepreneurial State of the Union. So we'll be having a conversation with Ian Hathaway, and then a panel discussion with some of our thought leaders in the greater Sacramento region. So definitely sign up and join us this evening. And thank you again, David, for the conversation, and hope this is a nice welcome to Sacramento, and hopefully we can plug you in with our entrepreneurs and some of our ecosystem champions that were on this call. So we will be sending out this recording and then the PDF as well later on, probably next week after Global Entrepreneurship Week is done. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to seeing you the rest of the week.